refer to the sheet titled Friction Milestone for Beginners. Yeah, please hop in. Now, the sheet comprises really very basic, simple problems on friction. We'll take you past all the rudiments that we covered in concept. These problems, you know, once you go past these, you'll have all the basic notions related to friction in place. All right, let's examine these problems together. Okay. So the first problem, 1A, is about two blocks. There is a block of mass capital M and there is a block of mass small m, right? And it's given, so this block is referred to as A, this block is referred to as B. It's given that the velocity of this block is 3 meters per second, whereas velocity of this block is 5 meters per second, right? And there is friction between A and B, and there is also friction between B and the ground. There are two interfaces. We want to be able to find the direction of friction on each of the blocks at the two interfaces, right? Now, the AB interface, see, this is AB. This is A, this is B. A moving with a velocity of 3 meters per second and B moving with a velocity of 5 meters per second. All right. Which means velocity of B with respect to A, velocity of B as seen by A is to the right. Yes or no? Velocity of B with respect to A is 2 meters per second to the right. That means if you are sitting on A, B, it will report a velocity of B equal to 2 meters per second to the right. Therefore, A will exert on B a frictional force which is to the left. So A will exert on B a frictional force to the left. Will it be kinetic friction or static friction? Kinetic, obviously there is relative motion between the two, so friction has to be kinetic. Okay. If A exerts on B a frictional force to the left, B will exert on A frictional force to the right. Right? Friction will always, like I said, act in a manner so that relative motion is discouraged. We want to be able to discourage relative motion. If both bodies had 3 meters per second to the right, there would have been no relative motion between the two bodies and there would have been no frictional force. Because as long as there is no relative motion or there is no tendency of relative motion, friction will not act. Clear? Okay. Now, between B and the ground will observe B to be moving to the right. So ground would exert on B a frictional force F prime K to the left. Yes or no? Do you understand that? So on capital M, that is on B, there would be two frictional forces acting. Because of A, one to the left. Because of the ground, another frictional force F prime K to the left. And on A, there is only one friction, which is Fk to the right. Right? That is how it is, right? In this, but kinematically, A is a weaker entity, right? So frictional force supports the weaker entity so that over a period of time, there is a prospect of the weaker entity matching the stronger entity in a kinematic standpoint. This is how friction will always act. Clear? A is weaker because it has a smaller velocity towards the right compared to B. That's why I say kinematically weaker. All right? 1B. There is a cart. This is a cart. And inside this cart, this surface of the cart is rough. This surface of the cart is rough. Inside the cart, there is a 5 kg block. There is a 5 kg block inside the cart. And the cart has an acceleration A0 equal to 8 meters per second squared is the acceleration of the cart. This is the cart, right? That's given. The coefficient of friction between the block and the cart, the coefficient of friction is given to be 0.2. 0.2. Determine the distance traversed by the block with respect to the cart in 5 seconds. Let's analyze this first. We want to be able to obtain the distance traversed by the block in the cart frame of reference in 5 seconds. Clear? See, first of all, the cart has an acceleration to the right, right? Frictional force on the 5 kg block must therefore act in a manner so that it can maintain harmony between the cart and the block. So that, you know, the endeavor of frictional force that acts on the block by the cart would be such that it would want the block and the cart to have the same acceleration, that is 8 meters per second squared to the right? But whether frictional force is enough or not has to be examined, right? If you go on increasing the value of this acceleration, frictional force that can act on the block by the cart may not be sufficient enough to provide the block the same acceleration as the cart. Yes or no? So first of all, let us try and have a few numbers in place. Let us find out what is the maximum frictional force that can exist between the block and the cart. The block side of the story is a 50 Newton force acting downwards, right? 5 kgs, which is 50 newtons acting downwards, Mother Earth. And there is normal reaction from the cart, R upwards, right? Now, in absence of vertical acceleration, R must be 50 newtons. R must be 50 newtons. So, the normal reaction between the block and the cart is 50 newtons. Now, what would this do? This would enable us compute the maximum frictional force that can exist between the block and the cart. So, the maximum frictional force, maximum static friction as is commonly referred to, is mu into R. Mu is given to be 0.2 into 15 newtons. That makes it 10 newtons. Yes or no? This is actually maximum static friction, which in absence of more data could also be looked upon as kinetic friction. Maximum static friction and kinetic friction, they differ very slightly in their values and they are almost the same. If you don't have data for mu k, then what you compute out of mu s into r could also be used almost legally for kinetic friction. Alright, so this is also like kinetic friction now. So this is the maximum force that the cart can exert on the block, right? Now, in which direction would the cart exert a force on the block, frictional force on the block? In which direction will the cart exert on the block a frictional force to the right? Why? Because, hey, like I said, friction is benevolent. It would want the two to move together. So if the cart has an acceleration to the right, the cart will exert on the block a frictional force such that the block also has an acceleration to the right, so that there is harmony to the extent possible. That's the whole idea, right? So now, first let us see. So the maximum value of F that the cart can exert on the block is 10 newtons, right? The maximum frictional force that the cart can exert, the maximum F that the cart can exert on the block is 10 newtons. Now, whether this 10 newtons is good enough for the block to have a rightward acceleration, well, for the block, if the block required a rightward acceleration of 8 meters per second squared to 8 meters per second squared, then the required frictional force would have been, this is a 5 kg block, would have been 5 into 8, which is 40 newtons would have been required. 40 newtons would have been required in order that the block could have a rightward acceleration same as the cart. But unfortunately, F is incapable of providing 40 newtons. The best that F can do is 10 newtons. So it will do its very best. It will say, all right, this is my limitation. This far and no further. Let us settle for 10 newtons. And therefore, the block, the cart exerts on the block a 10 Newton force to the right. Because that's the maximum it could. Although the block needed 40 newtons so that it could have the same acceleration as that of the cart, it was not to be. Not to be. Right? Now, consequently, relative motion comes into play between the block and the cart, because the block has a rightward acceleration of 8 meters per second squared. The cart is incapable, the cart has a rightward acceleration of 8 meters per second squared. The block cannot have a rightward acceleration of 8 meters per second squared because of inadequate friction. Because of inadequate friction. Okay. So then this is the 5 kg block being supported by 10 Newton frictional force to the right, causing the block to have a rightward acceleration of 10 by 5, 2 meters per second squared to the right. Yes or no? Cart has a rightward acceleration of 8 meters per second squared. The block has a rightward acceleration of 2 meters per second squared. Yes or no? Which means the acceleration of the block as seen by the cart, acceleration of the block with respect to the cart, ABC. Right? Acceleration of the block with respect to the cart would be what? Acceleration of the block minus acceleration of the cart, which is acceleration of the block is 2 meters per second squared minus 8 meters per second squared. That means minus 6 meters per second squared to the right. Acceleration of the block with respect to the cart is minus 6 meters per second squared to the right, which is like 6 meters per second squared to the left. Minus 6 to the right is like 6 to the left. Right? That means the acceleration of the block as seen by the cart in the cart frame of reference is 6 meters per second squared to the left. This is the relative acceleration of the block as seen by the cart. And this relative acceleration will cause relative displacement with respect to the cart. Therefore, the relative displacement that the block has with respect to the cart, that means block with respect to the cart, would be what? Half of A relative into T squared. But A relative is 6 meters per second squared to the left. And T is given to be 5 seconds. In 5 seconds. So this is 25. 75 meters. Got me? Now, you can get a little cynical and say, hey, what if it is not that long enough? We'll assume it's long enough for it to have traversed 75 meters or more in the cart frame of reference. Right? 75 meters is too long for a cart to have, but that's all right. Let's not break our heads on that. But so far so good, right? Okay. Consider a block which is moving with a velocity VB. Velocity VB. In a car which is moving with a velocity VP. In a car which is moving with a velocity VP. There is a block inside a car and the velocity of the block is VB, velocity of the car is VP. Now, VB is given to be 3I plus J. Velocity of the block is given to be 3I cap plus J cap. Whereas, velocity of the car is given to be 7I cap minus 2J cap. Yeah, please come in. 7I cap minus 2J cap. We want to find the direction of the frictional force acting on the block. We want to find the direction of the frictional force acting on the block. Okay. First of all, let me find what will determine the direction of the frictional force. The relative velocity of the block with respect to the car. So first thing that you have to do is the relative velocity of the block with respect to the car. Frictional force on the block will act in an opposite direction. Will not act in the direction of relative motion. It will act in a direction opposite to relative motion because it wants to discourage relative motion, right? So velocity of the block with respect to the car. Velocity of the block with respect to the car is going to be velocity of block minus velocity of car. VB minus VP, right? Which is minus 4i cap plus 3j cap, right? Now, a unit vector in this direction, a unit vector in the direction of relative velocity would be minus 4i cap plus 3j cap by root 4 square plus 3 square. That's a unit vector in the direction of the relative velocity of the block with respect to the car, which turns out to be minus 4 by 5 I cap plus 3 by 5 j cap. Yes or no? Frictional force will act in a direction opposite to this. Right? The direction, a unit vector in the direction of frictional force. A unit vector in the direction of frictional force, suppose you call it d cap, then that d cap would be negative of a unit vector in the direction of relative motion. 4i cap by 5 minus 3 by 5 j cap. Right? This is the direction in which this is a unit vector in the direction of relative velocity. Opposite to this direction would be the direction of frictional force. So a unit vector in the direction of frictional force would be negative of this unit vector. Negative of this unit vector, which would be 4i cap by 5 minus 3j cap by 5. Does it make sense to you or not? All's good? Okay. There is a 10 kg block here, right? And resting on a floor with mu equal to 0.5. And there is a 30 Newton force applied on the block to the right. Okay. We want to find the acceleration of the block. So first of all, let me find the maximum static friction between the block and the ground. Let me find out the maximum static. So first of all, Mother Earth, 10 into G, 100 newtons acting downwards. Normal reaction on the block, R, will be 100 newtons to prevent vertical acceleration, right? So F max is going to be mu into R, which is 50 newtons. That means the ground can exert on the block a frictional force that can go anywhere from 0 to 50 newtons. All right. That means if 30 newtons is applied, then frictional force will be 30 newtons to the left. I mean, just because it's capable of applying 50 newtons doesn't mean it will apply 50 newtons. It will apply any value from 0 to 50 newtons that will prevent relative motion. So it applies 30 newtons to the left. If this is increased to 40 newtons, this will become 40 newtons. If this becomes 48 newtons, this will become 48 newtons. When this becomes 50 newtons, this will become 50 newtons. But when this becomes 50.5 newtons, this will remain 50 newtons. That is what would happen. Clear? So acceleration of this is going to be 0, right? So there is a block here resting on a rough surface, the wall, and there is a rope. Initially, this is zero tension, right? No tension, right? And this is capital M. The static friction between the block and the ground is given to be mu s. Initially, this string is not stretched. That means zero tension initially. Now, an external force F is applied on the mass M. We want to be able to draw the graph between the applied force and the tension that builds in the string. The tension that builds in the string as I gradually increase F. All right. Okay. Now what you need to understand here is there are two things, when I apply a force F on this mass M, two things are capable of happening. One, there is string which might behave like the elder brother. Yeah, there is the string which might behave like the elder brother, and tension will build and will put no load on the ground. Frictional force will not be allowed to act. Or the second possibility is when I apply the force F here, initially friction tells the string, don't worry, all sacrifices to be done by me. I'm going to pitch in first. You don't have to act. Let me put myself completely into it. When I give up, you take care of the rest. And actually that is what happens. When you start pulling this to the right, then initially tension stays relaxed, right? But friction takes the load on itself, takes the onus, responsibility of preventing the block from moving on the ground, right? So when I apply a small value of F, a small frictional force builds between the block and the ground, preventing the block from moving. Tension will remain zero. Further increase it by a small amount. Again, friction, if it has that capability, it will act in an opposite direction. Again, keeping the string safely guarded and protected. It will not take, the tension in the string will still remain zero. But as capital F is gradually increased, the load on friction also increases commensurate, right? Frictional force begins to grow in magnitude, right? And eventually, for a certain value of F, which is maximum static friction between the block and the ground. What is maximum static friction between the block and the ground? Mu s mg. Mu s mg is the maximum static force between the block and the ground, right? When capital F assumes this value, then friction F becomes F max. When capital F assumes this value, then friction becomes equal to this value and it still maintains this block in equilibrium. Until then, there is no load on the string. The string remains relaxed in that context. There is no built up of tension in the string. That means, if you look at tension versus capital F, is it tension versus capital F that they are asking? Tension versus capital F. As capital F is increased initially, tension will remain zero. Tension will remain up to what point? Up to a point where capital F becomes equal to maximum static friction. Yes or no? When capital F becomes equal to maximum static friction, tension will remain zero. But when capital F is increased beyond this value, friction will remain mu s mg only, but tension will take the rest of the load. So then tension will start to grow from this point onwards. Any increase in capital F, let's say if capital F increases by this amount, tension will increase by the same amount. If capital F increases by this amount, tension will increase by the same amount, so that equilibrium can be maintained. could be maintained. Yes or no? All along, from this value of capital F 0 to a value equal to this, there was friction that was adequate enough to prevent build-up of tension and to maintain equilibrium, right? From this point onwards, as capital F is increased beyond this point, frictional force will remain equal to this value, right? But there is still need for this to maintain equilibrium. That's when, from this point onwards, tension takes over. There is build-up of tension in the string. And if capital F increases by this amount from this point onwards, tension will increase by the same amount so that equilibrium could be maintained. Yes or no? Right? That means if this is equal to this, then this angle must be 45 degrees. This angle must be 45 degrees. Now, you might wonder, hey, will this happen forever? I can go on increasing capital F and will tension go on increasing forever? The string will snap after a while. Right? The string will snap after a while. There is a breaking strength of the string. It can withstand tensions only to a certain point. Right? So when T becomes equal to some tension, maximum possible tension, up to this point, it will maintain equilibrium. But when capital F is increased beyond this permissible TB, then the string will snap. The string will snap. And the body will start to move rightwards. And then when the string snaps, what happens to the tension in the string? 0. It becomes 0. The string snaps, the tension in the string becomes 0. That means from this point onwards, what happens to the tension? It will dip to 0. It will remain 0. You go on increasing capital F, the string is dead. Will remain dead. So this happens. Then at some value of capital F, the tension in the string becomes the maximum it could be. Further increase in capital F will cause the string to snap, the tension to become 0. The string will remain inert to capital F beyond that because it is dead. It has got snapped. There would be tension, no built up of tension beyond that point. Do you all understand that? Got me? All's good so far? There is a 10 kg block here. The frictional force between the 10 kg block and the ground is given to be, coefficient of friction is given to be 0.5. Capital F acting at an angle 37 degrees. Capital F is gradually increased. The question to address is, see again, if capital F is increased, the vertical component of capital F will also increase. That means there is propensity for the block to get lifted, but also the horizontal component of capital F is increased, right? What? The horizontal component of capital F is also increased. That means there is propensity for the block to also slide. Question is, don't think that both things will happen simultaneously, right? We want to find out whether the block will first get lifted or will first begin to slide as capital F is increased. Do you understand the question? Whether it's going to slide first or whether it's going to get lifted first. Clear? Okay. Let me find out the value of capital F for which the block will get lifted. Let me find out the value of capital F for which the block will begin to slide. If the value of capital F for which the block gets lifted is smaller than the value of capital F for which it begins to slide, then it will first get lifted. If the value of capital F for which the block begins to slide is less than the value of capital F for which it will get lifted, then it will first begin to slide. Yes or no? You know what I'm saying? So let me find out two values of F. One, that will cause the block to get lifted. Two, that will cause the block to slide. Yes or no? Let me see which is smaller. Whichever is smaller, that event will happen first. Yes or no? Pradyum? F cos 37 degrees. Cos 37 degrees is 4 by 5. So F cos 37 degrees is 4F by 5. F sin 37 degrees is 3F by 5. Now, there is 10 newtons downwards. If the normal reaction is R, 100 newtons downwards, 10 G, then very clearly, to calculate R for any given F, what would R be? R plus 3F by 5 must balance 100 newtons. Yes or no? R plus 3F by 5 must balance 100 newtons. Therefore, the normal reaction for any F is going to be 100 minus 3F by 5. Yes or no? Right? Okay. Now, let me find out the value of F for which it will get lifted. Right? To get lifted, (3F by 5) must be greater than or equal to 100 newtons. Right? 3F by 5 must be greater than or equal to 100 newtons. That will give me the critical value of F for which the block will get lifted. Right? That means F greater than or equal to 500 by 3 newtons. That means when F becomes equal to 500 by 3, the block will start to get lifted. Right? So, for F equal to 500 by 3 newtons, block starts to get lifted. The block starts to get lifted. Right? Now, let me find out the value of F for which the block will begin to slide. Okay. The block to begin sliding, (4F by 3), 4F by 5 must exceed maximum static friction. Must exceed maximum static friction. That means must be greater than or equal to mu, which is given to be 0.5 into normal reaction R, which is 100 minus 3F by 5. 100 minus 3F by 5 is the normal reaction. Yes or no? That is when it will begin to slide. 4F by 5 must overcome maximum static friction between the block and the ground so that it begins to slide. And maximum static friction between the block and the ground is 0.5 into mu into normal reaction R. Normal reaction R, like, is this? So, which means 4F by 5. So, what I could do is, this I can write as 8F by 5. Right? Half. So, and then, so 8F by 5. So, 11F by 5 greater than or equal to 100. 11F by 5 greater than or equal to 100. So, F greater than or equal to 500 by 11. That means, when F just about becomes 500 by 11 newtons, block begins to slide. Slide. When F is 500 by 3 newtons, it will start to get lifted. Which comes earlier, 500 by 11 or 500 by 3? 500 by 11 comes earlier. That means the block will first slide. And when F subsequently becomes 500 by 3 newtons, it will get lifted. Yes or no? Got me? Now there is an inclined plane like this. There is a block, inclined plane of mass capital M, block of mass small m. Ball like this. All right. For some reason, in some manner, let's say, if the inclined plane has an acceleration a to the right. If the inclined plane has an acceleration a to the right. And the coefficient of friction between small m and capital M, between capital M and small m, is given to be mu. We want to find the net force on small m. We want to be able to find the net force on small m. Okay. Now, the net force on small m really would be a consequence of the net acceleration of small m. If I can find the net acceleration of small m as seen by a ground observer, then mass into net acceleration of small m will give me the net force, not just frictional force. What are the forces acting on small m, by the way? Tell me. Yes, one, there is going to be frictional force, there is going to be tension, there is going to be Mother Earth, and capital M will exert on small m a normal reaction n to the right. Yes or no? Capital M will exert on small m a normal reaction n to the right. Are you convinced about the summary of forces acting on small m? There is tension because of the string. There is normal reaction that the inclined plane will exert on the block, and that will be to the right. It has to be pushing in character. There is going to be Mother Earth, and since small m has a tendency to slide downwards, there is going to be friction acting on the block. Yes or no? Got me? I want to find the net force. One thing to do is find n, find t, find friction, mg, and do a vector summation, right? Nothing wrong with it, but nothing great about it either. All right, what we do here is, look at the following. One, okay, answer my questions piecemeal. Capital M has a acceleration a to the right, right? Now, what is the wedge constraint? If two bodies have to maintain contact, then their kinematic status along their common normals must be the same. Yes or no? So, if capital M has an acceleration a to the right, which is along the common normal, which is given, right? Then small m, its rightward component of acceleration must be a. Yes or no? Its rightward component of acceleration must be a. Why? That's a wedge constraint. Don't have a choice. If it had an acceleration any different from a to the right, then the block and the inclined plane will lose contact. This is the condition to maintain contact. Wedge constraint. If two surfaces have to maintain contact, then along their common normal, which is this direction for this case, they must have the same velocity, they must have the same acceleration. Their kinematic condition in that direction must be synonymous. Got me? Right. So if the inclined plane, which is known to have an acceleration a to the right, the block in this direction, its acceleration component in this direction cannot be anything but a. That's guaranteed, right? So what I'm looking at is, I'm looking at the net effect to compute the net force, right? So this is one part of the effect produced on small m. Now, if in a given time this length decreases by small a units, if this decreases by small a units, then what according to you would happen to this? This will decrease by small a. If this distance decreases by small a in a given time, then this string length will decrease by a units. And if this part of the string has decreased in length by small a units, then this would increase by small a units. That's a string constraint. That's a string constraint. Yes or no? That means if this moves to the right by small a units, this will move downwards by small a units. Yes or no? Right? Which means the downward acceleration of small m must be small a units. That's a string constraint. That's a consequence of string constraint. So small m now, look, small m has a rightward acceleration of small a. That's because of the wedge constraint. Has a downward acceleration of small a. That's because of string constraint. That's a net effect. It cannot be anything other than this. Yes or no? And therefore, as seen by a ground observer, the net acceleration of small m is going to be a root 2. Yes or no? In this direction, that's going to be the net acceleration of small m. And therefore, the net force acting on small m is going to be ma root 2. All put together, ma root 2. Are you all okay with this or not okay with this, Niloy? अरे बाबा all shop शुद्धू नहीं होक ना भाई. Friction, tension, normal, gravity, it does not matter really. One thing I know, that it must have a rightward acceleration because that's a goddamn wedge requirement. It must have a downward acceleration because that's a goddamn string requirement, right? That far and no further. Got me? So A and A, perpendicular directions. A root 2 is the net acceleration. Ma root 2 must be the net of all forces acting on a ball. Okay, here's a mass hanging on this side of the pulley, and this is a string attached to this block, and there is a spring between these two masses. All right. The coefficient of friction between this block and the ground is 0.1. The coefficient of friction between this block and the ground is 0.6. Right. Now, between the 4 kg block and the ground, this is 40 newtons. Normal reaction R will be 40 newtons to maintain vertical equilibrium. So what's the maximum static friction between the block and this ground? 4 newtons. 40 into 0.1, 4 newtons. Between the 6 kg block and the ground, maximum static friction, there is 60 newtons. Normal reaction R2 is 60 newtons. So F max here is going to be 6 newtons. So the maximum static friction between this block and the ground is 6 newtons. The maximum static friction between this block and the ground is 4 newtons. That's given. Now I want to be able to find the elongation in the string, at an instant when the system assumes equilibrium. That means, let's say, the acceleration of this becomes 0. The net force on this becomes 0. That would be a state of equilibrium. That is what I mean by equilibrium here. The net force on this becoming 0 would be a state of equilibrium. Now, question number 1 that I want to ask. Suppose this, instead of being a spring, this was a string. All right. Suppose instead of spring, this was a string. Newtons, Mother Earth. Suppose this was a string and this was, say, maximum static friction is 4 newtons here. Between these two, maximum static friction is 6 newtons. Okay. Suppose this was a string between these two. What's going to happen? Huh? Very good, very good. Because this is equivalent to saying, it's as if, you straighten matters here. This is the 10 kg block. It's as if there is a 10 newtons applied like this. There is this string here, 4 kg. There is 6 kg. It's equivalently like this. And if I apply a 10 newtons and I look at the free body diagram of this entire thing, right, then the maximum force that this can apply on this is 4 newtons. The maximum that ground can exert on this is 6 newtons. Now, very clearly, in order that this and this could move to the right, you have to overcome this 10 newtons. But you are applying just about 10 newtons, right? So, this will remain in equilibrium all the time. Right? But a revised situation. So it will remain in equilibrium all the time. The string is inextensible. Reason being, again, it's not possible that this block moves and this does not move. Can that happen? If this was a string, if this moves with a certain acceleration, this has to move with the same acceleration, right? Or it's not possible that this moves and this does not move, right? So if there are static conditions for this, then there will be static conditions for this as well, right? You know what I'm saying? In this case, things are slightly different, but do you understand whatever I'm saying? Right? Now, in a situation where instead of this being a string, this is a spring. It's possible then that this moves and this does not move. That's possible, isn't it? It's possible that because this is a spring, it's possible that this moves and this does not move, right? See, reason, if I just look at the free body diagram that comprises this block, this string, and this mass. Just look at the free body diagram of these three entities. And just straighten up matters, right? There is 1 kg. There is 4 kgs. There is this, right? Just this block, this string, and this mass, right? Now, if I pull it with a 10 Newton force here, which is like this, weight of this 10 Newton force, like this, then the first thing that has to be overcome is friction, which is overcome because maximum static friction between this block and the ground is 4 newtons. That's overcome. That means this will move to the right, right? However, if this was not 1 kg, but say was quarter of a kg, then this would have been 2.5 newtons, and it wouldn't have been enough to cause this 4 kg block to slide. If I look at the free body diagram of this whole thing, then tension, etc., would be all internal. The first thing that needs to be overcome is friction between the 4 kg block and the ground. So if it was a quarter Newton, it wouldn't have. But since this is 10 newtons, it overcomes the 4 Newton friction force between this 4 kg block and the ground and begins to slide. Yes or no? So for sure, this weight which is mg, 10 newtons, is causing this 4 Newton to slide. But what will cause this to slide? Spring force. Initially, the spring is unstretched. It only stretches. As this keeps moving leftwards, the spring gradually stretches. The spring force gradually builds up. And at some point of time, the spring force will build up to such an extent that it will overcome 6 newtons between this block and the ground. That's when this block will begin to move leftwards. Yes or no? That's the story of this block. Do you all understand? So, how things turn out to be in this situation is that this block first moves leftwards and this remains static. While the spring grows, spring force grows, it grows to a point where it overcomes this 6 Newton force, and this is on the verge of sliding. That is how it happens. Right? Okay. Now, equilibrium means. So initially this is moved leftwards, spring has elongated, and while spring has got elongated, let's say at some instant when this has acquired equilibrium. For equilibrium, this is the summary of all forces acting on this. What happens in equilibrium? T must become equal to 10 newtons. Equilibrium only means acceleration is 0. It doesn't mean velocity is 0. It only means acceleration is 0. But by the time this happens, this block would have developed a velocity. The block would have developed a velocity because it has descended down. It would have developed a velocity. So equilibrium doesn't mean being at rest. Equilibrium only means net force 0. So in equilibrium, T is 10 newtons. T is 10 newtons. Right? When T is 10 newtons, equilibrium means now if I think of the block, this 10 Newton, straighten up this block 10 newtons, this string 4 kg block, and this spring 6 kg block. Equilibrium means now, and I'm looking at the string and spring as part of the system. So in my free body diagram comprising this block, this block, this block, the spring and the string, the spring force and the string force will be internal, will not find a representation here, right? Now for this entire thing to be in equilibrium, there must be a 10 Newton force on this entire system leftwards, external. Now, which can only come out of the ground exerting 4 newtons on this 4 kg block to the left, the ground exerting 6 newtons on this 6 kg block to the right. 4 newtons to the right and 6 newtons to the left, producing that equilibrium on this entire system, which comprises the 3 blocks, the spring and the string. This is the state of equilibrium. Yes or no? This is the state of equilibrium. And which means now every element of the system is in equilibrium. When I say, so I could have looked at this in equilibrium, T becomes 10 newtons, right? This also in equilibrium. So if I look at the 4 kg block, there is tension T. Now this T is 10 newtons very clearly for equilibrium of this. Now T acts on this leftwards, right? So this T is 10 newtons on this. Now for equilibrium, there is 4 newtons, and because this has started to move already, right? So force of friction between this and this will not be static, will become kinetic, which is approximately maximum static. So there would be 4 newtons, and for equilibrium, the spring force would have become 6 newtons. Yes or no? That's equilibrium of this. Now look at this 6 kg block. 6 kg block, there is spring force of Spring force is 6 newtons, it's the same. Spring force, since the spring has got elongated, spring force on the 4 kg block will act in this direction. Spring force on the 6 kg block will act in this direction. Because the spring in an elongated state wants to cave in, If the spring in an elongated state wants to cave in, it will exert a rightward force on 4 kg block and a leftward force on the 6 kg block. And we have already found, out of equilibrium considerations for the 4 kg block, the spring force to be 6 newtons. Now this 6 newtons on the 6 kg block will act in this direction, yes or no? And for equilibrium, there is 6 newtons then acting to the right. So this is the state of equilibrium, which means in a state of equilibrium, what's the spring force? 6 newtons. 6 newtons is the spring force. In a state of equilibrium, 6 newtons must therefore be the spring force. Spring force is 6 newtons. And if x is the elongation in the spring, then spring force is k into x. Did I tell you this in an earlier class? Right? Spring force is k into x. Have I mentioned that? Right? K into x. K is given to be how much? 100 Newton per meter. So x is 6 by 100 meters, 0.06 meters. Is the elongation in the spring when the system reaches equilibrium. Got me? Are you all sure about every aspect of this problem? Clear? Is about 2 blocks A and B, and a time varying force applied on A, F equal to T. Starting from T equal to 0, this force gradually grows. Now, frictional force between A and the horizontal surface, we want to find the graph that obtains the frictional force between A and the horizontal surface. We want to find how frictional force between A and the horizontal surface varies as a function of time. Assume at T equal to 0, tension was 0 in the string, and so on and so forth, where mu s and mu k are coefficients of static and kinetic frictions. Mu s and mu k, coefficients of static and kinetic friction. All right. Okay. Now, there are various options given. Variation of friction with time. Frictional force acting on A with time. Okay. Now, initially when I cause this force to grow with time, who takes the brunt? Friction or tension? Friction between A and the ground or tension? Friction will take the brunt, right? Friction will grow commensurate with F. It will try and match the value of F to the extent possible, right? So initially, this is friction F between A and the ground. Will grow with time. Yes or no? When capital F becomes equal to mu s mg, when capital F becomes mu s mg, that means equal to maximum static friction between A and the ground. Right? What happens to frictional force? It becomes equal to mu s mg. It becomes equal to mu s mg. It assumes its maximum possible value, right? F max is mu s mg. So at some instant of time, T equal to T naught, when capital F becomes mu s mg, frictional force will also become mu s mg between A and the ground. Yes or no? Right? Now, when capital F is increased beyond this value, what will happen to the frictional force between? It will remain the same initially. What happens is, see, I'll tell you something. First of all, let's try and understand what will cause A to move. Is it possible that A moves and B does not move? Why? Because they're connected by a string. That's part and parcel of string constraint. All right. So let me look at A and B together for a while. Now, what's the maximum static friction between A and the ground? Mg. Is it same mass or different masses? What's given? Let me assume, say, different masses. Mu s m1g. Say this is m1. Same mass? Identical masses or different masses? Not that it will make a difference. Qualitatively, I need to. Maximum static friction between A and the ground is mu s m1g. Maximum static friction between B and the ground is mu s m2g. Now, let me see what will cause A to move. Is it possible that A only moves? Is it possible that only B moves? That means if they have to move together, right? That means I must apply a force F on A that will not only overcome friction between A and the ground, will also overcome friction between B and the ground. Only then they are capable of moving. Yes or no? You know what I'm saying? One thing, when capital F becomes mu s mg, friction becomes mu s mg. Now if I increase capital F further, then the value of capital F over and above mu s mg, you know, that will be countered by tension in the string. Tension begins to grow at that point of time. When friction resigns, tension begins to take over, right? So tension begins to grow, but frictional force will remain the same for some time. Yes or no? You know what I'm saying? Do you understand that? Friction will remain the same for a while. So, when capital F becomes larger than mu s mg, when capital F becomes equal to mu s mg at some t equal to t naught, friction will also become equal to mu s mg. But when capital F increases beyond mu s mg, frictional force between A and the ground will remain the same. So, for some time, frictional force remains the same. And it will remain static. Why? Because the propensity for A to move. If there was no string, A would have started to move and friction would have turned kinetic. But because of the string, the tension will now take over. It will try and hold A back. So friction will remain the same and it will remain static because tension will prevent further movement of A. If there was no string, then this would have moved to the right. Because of the string, it's held in position. Tension starts to take the additional difference between F and mu s mg gradually. You know what I'm saying? So frictional force between A and the ground remains mu s mg for some time, even though capital F increases beyond t equal to t naught. When capital F increases, frictional force remains the same for a while, right? And it remains at a value equal to maximum static. At a value equal to maximum static. Clear? Now, frictional force between A and the ground will change. Frictional force between A and the ground will change only when A starts to move. Then friction will become kinetic. Then friction will become kinetic. And frictional force will slightly decrease. Frictional force will slightly decrease. It will become mu k mg then. Right? Now, when would that happen? Therefore, I need to. So, it will remain as static for a while. But at t equal to t1, when A just about begins to slide, friction you would expect will decrease. Friction will decrease and will become kinetic, yes or no? After a while, friction will decrease, right? It will remain the same, but when for a certain value of capital F, when A begins to slide on the ground, friction will decrease and will come to this value, yes or no? right? Huh? Now, when would that happen? Let me see what is that instant when A and B will start moving together. When A and B start moving together, frictional force between A and the ground and B and the ground would have reached its maximum static value. That means A and B on the verge of moving on the ground. Then frictional force on B would be mu s mg. Frictional force on A would be mu s m1g and m2g respectively. And if I look at the free body diagram of A and B together, what's the external force? Capital F, friction, friction. Tension is now an internal force if I include the string in the description. So these are the only two external forces. Therefore, for what value of capital F, A and B will start to move together? When capital F becomes equal to mu s m2g plus mu s m1g. Then A and B will be on the verge of sliding on the ground. Alright? So which is this point? Which is t equal to t1? Isn't it? From here to here, frictional force increased. Then friction reached a value mu s mg when capital F became equal to mu s mg. When capital F became larger than mu s mg, even though friction remained the same, tension grew at that point of time. Tension in the string grew to maintain equilibrium of A. Right? When capital F became equal to mu s m1 plus m2 into g, overcoming friction both between A and the ground and B and the ground, then A and B were on the verge of sliding, which is this instant. Right? Now, when capital F became beyond t equal to t1, capital F became larger than this value, and then A and B started to slide, and when A and B started to slide, friction dipped because friction now turned kinetic in character. So friction dipped, and this is how. So this is how friction between A and the ground varied with time. Are you all right with this? So that's option C, right? Option C. There is a trolley here. Okay, they call it a truck. And there is a block 5 meters from this end, and the truck has an acceleration of 2 meters per second squared to the left and a box of 40 kgs kept over it 5 meters from the open end. The coefficient of friction mu between the block and the truck is given to be 0.15. When the truck has an acceleration of 2 meters per second squared and it maintains this, we want to find the time taken by the block to fall off the truck. Do you understand that? First of all, between the block and the truck. Okay. What are the forces acting on this 40 kg block? 400 newtons downwards. Normal reaction R from the truck is 400 newtons to maintain vertical equilibrium. Now, mu is 0.15. So, maximum static friction, not the actual value of friction, but maximum possible value of friction between the block and the truck is going to be 0.15 into 400, which is 60 newtons. Maximum static friction, right? Now, let me see what the 40 kg block needs. First of all, if the truck is moving to the left, the truck will exert on the block friction in which direction? Left or right? Left. Because friction wants the block to move in sync with the truck. Right? So if the truck has a leftward acceleration, friction that the truck will exert on the block will also be leftwards. right? So that this 40 kg block could have the same acceleration as the truck. Now, question is, how much of friction is required? 40 into 2, 80 newtons is required. In order that the block could have the same acceleration of the truck, how much frictional force must the block exert on the truck exert on the block? 40 into 2? If at all. I'm not saying that will happen, but the required value of the frictional force that the truck must exert on the block must be 40 into 2 in order that the block could have the same acceleration as that of the truck. But required is 80 newtons. So what? But what is the maximum available? 16 newtons. That means required is more than available. Therefore, required is not adequate enough. I mean, available is not adequate enough. Therefore, there is going to be relative motion between the block and the truck. Right? Frictional force required is 80 newtons, maximum available is 60 newtons. But 80 newtons is not available. So, frictional force acting on the truck will not be 80 newtons, but is going to be 60 newtons to the left. Causing the truck (60 newtons acting on the 40 kg block, causing the truck, causing the block, not the truck, causing the block to have an acceleration 60 by 40, 1.5 meters per second squared. So now I know the acceleration of the block. I know the acceleration of the truck. The truck is 2 meters per second squared. Right? That means very clearly the block has a lesser acceleration as that of the truck. Right? Acceleration of the block is 1.5 meters per second squared. Leftwards. Acceleration of the truck is 2 meters per second squared leftwards. So, acceleration of the block with respect to the truck, is going to be 1.5 minus 2 to the left. Both are to the left. That means minus 0.5 to the left is the acceleration of the block with respect to the truck. Minus 0.5 to the left is like 0.5 to the right. Yes or no? Minus 0.5 to the left is like 0.5 to the right. That means the acceleration of the block is actually 0.5 meters per second squared to the right. Relative acceleration. Acceleration of the block with respect to the truck is 0.5 meters per second squared to the right. Right? Now, in order that the block can fall off the truck, the distance that it must travel with respect to the truck is 5 meters. So, this relative distance that it must travel to the right is 5 meters. That must be half of relative acceleration, AREL to the right, which is 0.5 into starting from rest. So, T then must be 2 root 5 seconds.
Take the difference of the forces like 80 minus 60, 20 newton, and then 20 by 40 is equal to 0.5 meter per second square.
60 minus 20. No, where is that 80 acting but? 80 is not acting. It is required, yeah. If that was the frictional force available, it would have acted, yeah. This frictional force is never available. This is required. See, dekho. Listen to me carefully, huh? Understand the bigger picture. The truck is moving to the left with an acceleration of 2 meters per second squared. The block was peacefully resting on the truck. Now suddenly the truck has a leftward acceleration of 2 meters per second squared. Now suddenly friction between the truck and the block gets invoked. Alright. Why? Because even though the truck has a leftward acceleration of 2 meters per second squared, the block, has no way to go. It feels orphaned a little bit. So then friction comes into picture. It says, all right, dear block, let me try and give you as much support to the left so that you could have had the same acceleration as the truck. So friction, it has a calculator on its right. It says, let me see how much of force should I exert on the 40 kg block so that it has the same acceleration as the truck. So friction does this calculation. Internally, its processor does this calculation. It says, all right, in order that I could give the 40 kg block the same acceleration as the truck, I must exert on the block 40 into 2, 80 newtons. And then there is this PA of friction who says, hey dear guy, you don't have in your treasury so much of force available. The maximum that you have is 60 newtons. Why are you getting ambitious enough? You're getting too ambitious. You cannot give 80 newtons. What is available in your treasury is only 60 newtons. So then friction resigns to fate. It says, all right, I wish I could give 80 newtons. My limitation, I apologize. It apologizes to the 40 kg block. It says, wish I could give you 80 newtons. I don't have that much. I can only give you 60. This is the maximum that I could give to you. So it says, all right, at least the 40 kg block, very gleefully and gracefully though, accepts the 60 newton that friction could exert on it leftwards. Do you understand that? Now this 60 newton is not capable of giving the 40 kg block a 2 meter per second squared acceleration. What it gives to the 40 kg block is only 60 by 40, which is 1.5 meters per second squared leftwards. Is the idea clear now? इतना जरूरत था पर बेचारा दे नहीं सका. समझ गया? फ्रिक्शन. अरे तुम देने के बाद बाबा जी के सामने मत करो. बाबा जी इज थिंकिंग हमारे पास आता जितना चाहता दे देता. हाँ, मतलब है ना? Do you all understand what I'm saying? Or have I confused you? Nahi na? Clear? Very good. Ayush, are you clear about it? Nahi? Ask me questions. I'm here to address your questions. This is required, but not available.
80 newtons, that's 2 meter per second square speed. And 60 newtons, that's 1.5 meter per second square speed, and then you minus it equals 0.5.
No, I did not do 80 minus 60.
No, sir, that's what I did. You did 80 by 40 minus 60 by 40. And I did 80 minus 60.
Where is the logic then? See, I'll tell you, even number of, sometimes, Ayush, again, no offense, don't get emotional about, my discussion with you. Let's look at physically, don't look at the numbers, look at physically what it means. What does 80 minus 60 mean then? It means nothing, my friend. Physically batao mere ko. Don't do these calculations, this is required. This is required but unavailable, right? So eventually, it's the difference of this and that, the acceleration, but then physically that doesn't explain. Just look at it physically. Yeah, all the best. So far so good, right? This arrangement of pulleys then. This is a fixed horizontal surface and there is a board of mass small m resting here. Man of mass capital M standing over it and is pulling this rope. Now, if the man pulls the rope with a certain force T, the rope pulls on M in the opposite direction with a force T. So, if the man exerts a force F, then T is the force that the rope exerts on the man in the opposite direction. That means now the force in the string is T. Therefore, T is the force everywhere in the string. T therefore is the tension in the string. And on the block, At this point, tension will act to the right. Yes or no? Yes or no? Now, greater the value of T, the greater is the value of T here, the greater is the force T with which he pulls down, greater is this force T, greater is this force T. Greater is the possibility of small m to slide on the ground. What we are seeking to obtain is the maximum T so that the board does not slip on the ground. The maximum possibility that he must apply on the rope so that this board does not slip on the ground. Yes or no? Coefficient of friction between small m and the ground is mu. Ask me. Sure? Okay. First of all, look, T, in order that the block does not slip on the ground, in order that this block does not slip on the ground, T should be less than or equal to maximum static friction between the block and the ground. Yes or no? T should be less than or equal to maximum static friction between the block and the ground. Now, if the normal reaction between the block and the ground is N, what is the maximum static friction between the block and the ground? Mu N. And T should not exceed this number. T should not exceed this number, yes or no? T should be less than or equal to, now the whole task now is to be able to find N. The whole task is to be able to find N, the normal reaction between the block and the ground. Now what I do is, I look at the free body diagram. I examine the free body diagram of block, this block, that is the board as they mentioned in the problem, block plus man. Let me draw the free body diagram of block plus man. All right. That is the board plus man. This is the board of mass small m. This is man of mass capital M. All right. Now the force between capital M and small m in such a situation would be an internal force and will not be exhibited here. Right? The force between capital M and small m would be deemed internal and will not find any exhibition here. Clear? Now, the force that the man exerts on the rope downwards is the force that the rope exerts on the man upwards. So there is this T that the rope exerts on the man, an external force, right? There is this T on the board plus man, which is external. Then there is Mother Earth acting downwards, their weights, right? So which is capital M plus small m into G. That's courtesy Mother Earth, right? And then the ground exerts on the board a normal reaction N. Yes or no? Does it not summarize the free body diagram of the block plus man, board plus man? Tell me. Right? In the vertical direction, this gives us an opportunity to compute N. In the vertical direction, the net of all forces acting must be 0. Why? Because the board plus man has no vertical acceleration. So net of all forces in the vertical direction must add up to 0, which means T, board plus man, T plus N must balance what? M plus M into G. T plus N must balance M plus small m into G. Giving me access to N, which is what my objective was, M plus small m into G minus T. Yes or no? So I know N, and T has to be less than or equal to mu N. T has to be less than or equal to maximum static friction between the board and the ground so that the board does not slip on the ground. So T less than or equal to mu times n. N is m plus m into g minus t. Minus t. Yes or no? Transpose this t on this side, giving us t into 1 plus mu less than or equal to mu into m plus m into g. Yes or no? So t less than or equal to mu into m plus small m into g divided by 1 plus mu. If this happens, then the board is not gonna slip on the ground. That means what is T max? T less than or equal to this? That means T max must be this number. So what? Maximum T max. Since T is less than or equal to this, T max must be mu into m plus small m into g divided by 1 plus mu. That's a maximum permissible value of T for which the board is not going to slip on the ground. All right. Here's an arrangement of a pulley fixed to this L-shaped trolley. And this arrangement, this has an acceleration a naught to the right. And there is this mass small m, 40 kgs, and a naught is given to be 5 meters per second square. The coefficient of friction between small m, this is small m, and the base is given to be 0.5. Given all of this, we want to be able to find the tension in the string. We want to be able to find the tension in the string. Okay. Okay. First of all, let me find out the maximum static friction between this 40 kg block and the ground. There is 400 newtons downwards. Normal reaction is going to be 400 newtons upwards. So maximum frictional force, F max, is going to be 400 into 0.5, which is 200 newtons. Yes or no? That's a maximum frictional force. Yes or no? Now the question is, how much frictional force is required? In fact, do you realize that small m will move to the right, and friction in that case, if small m has an acceleration to the right with respect to the trolley, with respect to this arrangement, then frictional force on small m will act to the left. But the first thing is, let's understand whether small m will move to the right, or will it not move, or will it move to the left. Now whatever happens now, the first requirement to be met is that this string must remain constant in length. Yes or no? Constancy of string length? Now, look at this point. This point has an acceleration a naught to the right. Why? It's integral with the L So it'll have A naught to the right. What about this end? A naught to the right. Why? Same reason. What is the acceleration of this point? 0. Let us assume that the acceleration of the mass is A1. This will help me compute A1 in terms of A naught. And how do I do it? I can go from one end of the string to the other like I taught to you. Deploy string constraint. So I go this way, say A naught minus 0. Recall that? Constant length, wrap-up length, I don't bother about it. Then I go this way. Acceleration of this point in this direction, which is minus A1, minus acceleration of this point in this direction, which is minus A naught. All of this must add up to 0. That's the string constraint. This gives me A1 equal to 2A naught. A1 equal to 2A naught, yes or no? Do you all understand this? Huh? Right? Okay. That means the acceleration of the mass m is going to be 10 meters per second squared to the right. 2A naught. Yes or no? What? So let me just remove the clutter from here. So far so good, right? Which means acceleration of the truck is 5 meters per second squared to the right. Acceleration of small m is 10 meters per second squared to the right. That means there is relative motion between small m and the truck. There is relative motion between small m and the truck. Yes or no? Which means, and small m over a period of time will move faster than the truck. Right? Because it has greater acceleration compared to the truck. That means if it is moving fast, it will move faster than the truck over a period of time. Friction acting on, and there is relative motion between small m and the truck. And if there is relative motion between small m and the truck, as you can witness, then friction would have been kinetic in character and therefore approximately equal to maximum static. Yes or no? So the frictional force that the truck exerts on this block is 200 newtons. Kinetic, which is approximately equal to maximum static. Now, will the frictional force acting on small m be to the left or to the right? To the left. Koka, to the left. Oh, achha, frictional force acting on small m is going to be 200 newtons to the left. Why? Because small m is trying to move faster than the truck, right? Okay. Suppose the tension in the string is T units. Mass of this block is 40 kgs. Is 40 kgs? Yes or no? What are the forces acting in the horizontal direction? T, tension, 200 newtons, friction, maximum static, kinetic. There is actual relative motion between. That's why this value. If the conditions prevalent between the two were static, then I wouldn't have known the value of frictional force readily. It could have assumed any value from 0 to F max. But now that I know that there is relative motion between the two entities, then I am confident that the frictional force has a value which is kinetic friction, which is approximately equal to maximum static, which is 200 newtons. And this time it's acting to the left. Why? Because small m over a period of time will move faster than the truck. Why? Because it has greater acceleration compared to the truck. Right? Now, this gives us a very simple little thing to deal with. T minus 200 must be 40 into 10 mass into acceleration. Yes or no? T therefore is 600 newtons. Do you reconcile to this situation? Do you all understand everything that I have said here? There is a cart here. And there is a block here. Mass m, This block is referred to as A. Between M and this wall, the coefficient of friction is mu. Mu is given to be 0.2. Mu is given to be 0.2. Now, what's the minimum acceleration that we must impart to the cart so that block A does not fall? So that block A does not fall. Hey, look. Look at the free body diagram of small m. There is Mother Earth, mg, right? Yes or no? Now, there is no loss of contact between small m and the cart. So if the cart, so along the common normal direction, this is the common normal direction, they must have the same acceleration. In this direction, their acceleration components must be the same. So if the cart has an acceleration a naught to the right, then small m in the rightward direction, its acceleration component must be a naught. And how does it get this acceleration a naught? The normal reaction that the cart exerts on the block n to the right is instrumental in providing small m an acceleration a naught to the right. Yes or no? This has a propensity to slip down. Frictional force will act upwards. Yes or no? Now, one thing for sure, in order that it does not fall, what is required? F must be equal to mg. In order that it does not fall down, F must be equal to mg. And if it is not falling down, then this friction will be static in character and therefore will be less than or equal to maximum static friction. This cannot exceed maximum static friction, which is mu n. Yes or no? It cannot exceed maximum static friction mu n because there is no relative motion between the two. But what about n? What is n doing? N is providing small m an acceleration a naught to the right. So can I say n must be equal to ma naught? N must be equal to ma naught? So which means mg must be less than or equal to mu times ma naught. N is mg, replacing n by ma naught. When did I ever say it is mu mg? I've always said frictional force, maximum static friction is mu n. Tell me, have I ever said? It so happens that in some cases n becomes equal to mg. Doesn't mean maximum static friction is mu mg. I've always told you it's mu times normal reaction between two surfaces. It so happens in all other situations, n has turned out to be equal to mg, therefore it turned out to be mu mg. But why should it be? Frictional force between this surface and this surface, this is the normal reaction. So mu times n, it's not mu mg. In some situations or in earlier situations, it so happened that n was equal to mg. In this situation, for example, n is equal to mg. But in this situation, suppose this is like this, n is like this, and it is not equal to mg. N is like this, right? Are you all okay with this? Huh? So this gives me very clearly a naught greater than or equal to g by mu. A naught greater than or equal to g by mu, acceleration of the cart must be greater than or equal to g by mu so that it does not fall. This is the compliance, right? So a naught greater than or equal to g, which is 10, mu which is 0.2. So a naught greater than or equal to 50, 20. Oh, it's 0.2, 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. So 50. So what's the minimum a naught? 50. Minimum a naught is 50 meters per second squared, so that the block does not fall on the ground. Greater the acceleration, the greater would be the n between the two surfaces, greater would be the frictional force, greater will be its possibility to support the weight. This is how it happens. What? Not attempted beyond this, right? Attempted? Huh? Yes. It's not mattering. Clear? So here we have an arrangement of 3 blocks. M1, M2 and M3. M3. And this is rough. The M2, M3 interface is rough. And this surface is smooth. And the coefficient of friction between M2 and M3 is given to be mu. Now, what is it that we want? We want M2 to not slip downwards. We want M2 to not slip downwards. All right? And if we want M2 to not slip downwards, what is the range of F? What is the range of F that will cause M2 to not slip downwards? Right. We want the range of F so that M2 does not fall down. M2 does not fall down. That means there is ample friction between M2 and M3. Friction will act in this direction on M2, and that will take care of the weight of M2. That is what we essentially want, so that M2 does not fall downwards. That's the objective, right? Now, so if M2 is not falling downwards, it means that M1, M2 and M3 have the same acceleration, right? Have the same acceleration a to the right. The entire unit has a common acceleration a to the right. Yes or no? And if I looked at the free body diagram of M1, M2, M3, then the forces that M1 and M2 exert on each other, or M2 and M3 exert on each other, would be internal forces, will not be hungry of representation, right? The only horizontal force acting on the system comprising M1 plus M2 plus M3 is going to be F. Yes or no? Causing the system to have a common acceleration A equal to F divided by M1 plus M2 plus M3. So far so good? Yes or no? Hey, my objective is to handle this interface. It is the frictional force between M2 and M3 which is acting vertically on M2 that will take care of the weight of M2. Yes or no? That's what I want. And therefore, if I look at the free body diagram of M2, look at the free body diagram of M2. What are the forces acting on it? There is Mother Earth, M2G downwards. Yes or no? Then M1 will exert on M2 a normal reaction, say N1 like this. M3 will exert on M2 a normal reaction N like this. Yes or no? M2 has a propensity to slide down. So M3 will exert on M2 a frictional force F upwards. What? Now, what is it that I want? So now the maximum F is how much? Mu times N, because it's this interface. Therefore, the normal reaction between M2 and M3 will determine F max. F max is going to be mu N. Yes or no? F max is going to be mu n. Let me first compute n. Let me first compute n so that F max is known. F max therefore will be mu n. So let me find the normal reaction between M2 and M3. Let me find the normal reaction between M2 and M3. N. That way I'll know the maximum F, which is mu times n. What I do is, I look at the free body diagram of M3 alone. If I look at the free body diagram of M3 alone, tell me, this is M3. Mother Earth, M3G downwards, normal reaction from the ground, R, right? Right? Now, if M3 exerts on M2, N like this, M2 will exert on M3, N like that. Yes or no? Yes or no? If M3 exerts on M2 a frictional force F upwards, M2 will exert on M3 a frictional force F downwards. Yes or no? Does it summarize all the forces? Now the vertical forces F, M3G and R will balance each other, producing no vertical acceleration. The net effect of all of these must be an acceleration A to the right on M3. Yes or no? A on M3? M3 has the same acceleration. All entities have the same acceleration, of which we have knowledge. F by M1 plus M2 plus M3. So I have knowledge of A. Therefore, I know what N will produce A? M3A. What N will produce A on M3? M3A. So N I therefore know is M3A, which is M3 into F divided by M1 plus M2 plus M3. Yes or no? That's N? Are you okay with this? Now, look, come back to M2. In order that it has no vertical acceleration, the frictional force must be M2G. Frictional force that M3 exerts on M2 in the tangential direction must be equal to M3G, right? So in order that M2 does not fall, F must be equal to M2G. But F has a limitation. It cannot exceed maximum static friction, which is mu n. Mu n is the maximum static friction. So F should not exceed mu n. Yes or no? Which means M2G must be less than or equal to mu times n. N we have computed. N is this. Realize that? N is like this. N, which is M3F divided by M1 plus M2 plus M3. This is the requirement on F that must be met, right? And therefore from this equation, in equation F must be greater than or equal to M2G by mu M3, M2G by mu M3 into M1 plus M2 plus M3. Yes or no? All's good? Okay, now we want to calculate the frictional force between the 4 kg, in this case between the 4 kg block and the ground was just 0 before F1 and F2 were applied. We want to calculate the frictional force between the 4 kg block and the ground. Assume initially the tension in the string was 0 before F1 and F2 were applied. Frictional force between these two entities we need to obtain. Alright. Listen to me carefully. Simple thing, slightly conceptual though. So in all these cases, first compute the maximum static friction, which is not necessarily the actual value of the friction, which is the maximum that friction can give. all pairs of surfaces. In this case, what is the maximum? There is 20 newtons downwards. So normal reaction is 20 newtons upwards. So 20 into 0.4, which is 8 newtons. So now let me remove 4. Maximum F1 max here is 8 newtons, right? Maximum static friction between these two surfaces is going to be 8 newtons, something that will prevent a bullying force from getting A to move on this surface. Max, now this is 40 newtons downwards, normal reaction 40 newtons upwards. So 40 into 0.6, that is 24 newtons is the maximum static friction between these two surfaces. This is not necessarily the actual friction. This is the maximum static friction, which is 24 newtons here. Yes or no? Right? Now, what is going to happen? Is it possible that only one moves? There is a string. Is it possible? Huh? What will happen in this case? First of all, when two bodies are connected by strings, they have a heartfelt relationship. They move together. United they move. All right? It's not possible when they are connected by a spring, they enjoy the flexibility of one moving and the other one not moving. But when connected by a string, they say, all right. Except when the string breaks or snaps. मतलब समझ रहे हो? जब दिल के टुकड़े हो जाते हैं, then they move separately. But other than that, if they are connected by a string, and the string is intact, then they have to move together. It's not possible that A moves and B does not move, or B moves and A does not move. That is not possible in this situation. Because if that happened, then the constancy of string length will get defeated. It's not going to happen, right? Now, in a situation of this kind, look at a free body diagram comprising A, B, the string, the entire thing, A, B, the string, A, B and the string. What is the net force to the right? 20 newtons, 10 newtons, 20 minus 10, 10 newtons on the system. Of A and B, there is 10 newtons to the right? And together A and B can combat 8 plus 24, 32 newtons to the left to prevent a 10 Newton downward force from bullying them to the right. A frictional force of more than 10 Newton is there to combat that. Yes or no? See? A can exert 8 newtons to the left, B can exert 24 newtons to the left maximum, but they will not exert that unnecessarily, right? They will only combat the 10 Newton force. Yes or no? They will only combat the 10 Newton force. Therefore, for sure, the system is not moving. That is guaranteed. Because A and B together have a max combined strength of 32 newtons, which is more than 10 newtons, and that's good enough to prevent sliding. Is that all right or not all right? Okay. Now, so for sure, A and B remain static. What are the various possibilities? One possibility, for example, and there are only two possibilities. The first one is this. Look at the free body diagram of A alone, for example. When I look at the free body diagram of A alone, there is 10 newtons to the left. There is 10 newtons to the left. And initially, you know, think of just this. First of all, since this 10 newtons is more than 8 newtons, it's possible, I'm not guaranteeing that that's going to happen, it's possible that this maximum static friction is reached here. Because first, you know, friction will combat this. Friction will combat this, and only then tension will come into the picture. Right? Let us say this 8 newtons has done its bit maximum to combat this. But that's a maximum. The rest is taken over by the string. Tension 2 newtons then in the string. Tension 2 newtons. Let's see if this is possible. Now with this data, let me come back to the free body diagram of B. Let me come to the free body diagram of B. B. There is 20 newtons like this. Now tension will remain 2 newtons only. Yes or no? 2 newtons. Right? That means this is 2 newtons, this is 20 newtons. That means frictional force must be 18 newtons, which is possible because this 18 is less than 24, so this value of frictional force is possible. This is one possibility, isn't it? This is one possibility, but this is not the only possibility. The second possibility is the following. Let me start with B. Let me start with B. All right. When I start with B, there is 20 newtons like this. There is 20 newtons like this. Let us assume that, you know, between these two, suppose if I started with B and this was 20 newtons to the right, then there is enough friction to combat. There is enough friction to combat, and therefore, because friction can go all the way to 24 newtons, therefore it can give a 20 newton leftward force. And then the role of the tension is 0. So tension then will become 0. This is B. Tension will then become 0. But give me a little while, yaar. That's the whole idea. Tension is 0. Now come back to A with this, if this is possible. I will have to cross check with A to examine the prospect of this actually happening. Come to A. If I come to A, and so tension is 0. This is 10 newtons, but A is also at rest. A is also at rest. Right? Because either A and B, see, if B is at rest, A will also be at rest. That means the net force on A must be 0. That means friction can provide up to 10 newtons. Friction on A can provide up to 8 newtons. And this force is 10 newtons. Tension is 0. But friction is only 8 newtons. Can A remain in equilibrium? That means this case is not possible. This case is not possible. This must be then the relevant case, and frictional force is as shown. The tension in the string must be 2 newtons. That is how it goes. System of this kind, a mass capital M and 2 other masses M1 and M2 whose masses are shown, and a force capital F, horizontal force capital F applied on mass capital M, right? 2 pulleys, both fixed to the block capital M, and there is friction between M2 and the ground, right? And maximum, and the coefficient of friction between M2 and the ground is given to be 0.3. The mass of M2 is 5 kgs, so the maximum static friction between M2 and the ground is going to be mu mg, which is 15 newtons. Again, look at M1. The maximum static friction between M1 and the block capital M, F1 max, is going to be 0.3 into 20 into 10. That makes it 60 newtons. Right? These are not necessarily actual values of friction F1 and F2 between M1 and the block and M2 and the ground. Right? They are the maximum possible values of friction between this surface and this surface. Okay? Now, what really happens is when this force capital F is applied, it is found that F1, the actual frictional force between M1 and the block, the actual frictional force between M1 and the block is twice the frictional force between M2 and the ground. That's F1 is F2. Now, given this, we want to be able to find the value of capital F, we want to be able to find the tension in the string, and we want to be able to find the acceleration of all the three masses involved in the system, right? Okay. Now, two possibilities. One, when I apply a force capital F, and look at this entire system, right? When I apply a force capital F and I look at M1, M2, these pulleys, capital M as one single unit, then capital F has to overcome maximum static friction between M2 and the ground, which is 15 newtons. Now, if capital F is less than 15 newtons, if capital F is less than 15 newtons, then M2 will not move. And if M2 does not move, the system stays static, because if M2 is not moving, that means this length of the string is not changing. I mean, see, if this length of the string changes, is it possible that M2 remains fixed? M2 will not remain fixed, right? So, one thing for sure, that M2 is moving. And the frictional force between M2 and the ground would be kinetic friction, would have reached a value approximately equal to maximum static friction of 15 newtons. So the actual value of the frictional force between M2 and the ground turns out to be F2, which is F2 max, which is 15 newtons. Yes or no? Right? Now it's given that F1 is twice F2. F1 is twice F2 is given, that means F1 must be 30 newtons. F1 must be 30 newtons, which means frictional force between M1 and capital M is 30 newtons. But frictional force between M1 and capital M, 30 newtons, means it's less than 60 newtons. If the frictional force between M1 and capital M is less than maximum static, which it is, 30 newtons, that means there is no relative motion between M1 and capital M. M1 is not rubbing over capital M, which means capital M and M1 must have had the same acceleration, because there is no relative motion between the two. Which means if capital M and M1 have the same acceleration, then in a given time, if this unit moves to the right by a certain amount, if capital M moves to the right by a certain amount, that means this pulley would have moved to the right by a certain amount. That means M2 must have drifted to the right by the same amount. Yes or no? That means, for sure, capital M and M1 have the same acceleration. From the system, what transpires is that M2 also has the same acceleration as M1, capital M and M2. That means the entire unit has the same acceleration A. Yes or no? Now, if I look at the free body diagram, which involves all the three masses, then since M2 is moving rightwards, it's not staying static. Frictional force between M2 and the ground must have reached its maximum static value of 15 newtons. Yes or no? That means capital F, if I apply Newton's second law to this entire unit, right? Then whatever happens between M1 and capital M, etc. is internal. We will not bother about that, right? Then for the entire unit, if I apply Newton's second law, then F minus 15, isn't it? F minus 15 must be capital M plus M1 plus M2 into A, right? And capital M plus M1 plus M2, as you can see, is 75 kgs. So this must be 75 into A. That's one equation. Yes or no? That's one equation, right? Now, think of M1 alone. Think of M1 alone, the free body diagram of M1 alone. What is M1 alone? Tension will act leftwards. What would be the direction of the frictional force F1 acting on M1? It has to be right, because M1 is eventually accelerating with capital M to the right. So M1 and capital M have the same acceleration, A to the right. So, you know, this tension and friction, if both were to be acting to the left, then M1 would not drift to the right. So very clearly, friction F acts to the right, F1. And F1 we found is 30 newtons. So F1 equal to 30 newtons will act to the right on M1, right? Which means now, and it would have the same acceleration as the entire unit, which means 30 minus t, 30 minus t must be M1. M1 is 20 into A. This was 75A, equation 1. This is 20A, equation 2. 30 minus t is this. Yes or no? Now, look at the free body diagram of M2 alone. M2 alone. This was M1 alone. Let me look at the free body diagram of M2 alone. Is going to be what? There is going to be T acting to the right. There is frictional force which would have reached its maximum static value, 15 newtons. That means equation of motion is going to be T minus 15 equal to M2. M2 which is 5 into A. Equation 3. Yes or no? Now, all set, because you can use equation 2 and 3 to solve for T and A. Once you solve, in fact, if you add the two, what do you get? If you add equations 2 and 3, you get 15 equal to 35A. Right? 15 equal to 35A. So 35A equal to 15, leading to A equal to 3 by 7. Am I right? Or have I made a calculation mistake? Oh, 25A. This is not 35A. This is 25A. Isn't it? If I add these two, 15 equals 25A. So A equals 3 by 5 meters per second square. And you plug in A equal to 3 by 5 meters per second square, you get access to capital F. Capital F would be 15 plus 75A. A is 3 by 5. So that makes it 15 plus 45. That makes it 60 newtons. Yes or no? Right? Do you understand every aspect of this problem? Right? Why all three masses are bound to have the same acceleration, and the fact that there is no relative motion between M1 and capital M. Why? Because F1 turns out to be less than 60 newtons, right? So this much for this session. We'll then catch up for more problem solving on friction in the next class. Thank you. Bye-bye.